Welcome. I'm really excited because today I have 4 principals from 4 major inner city schools in New York City. And this has been quite a year to be a principal and in anywhere, but New York was, I think, the first big city to open up their public schools. So it was really quite a challenge. So I'm going to tell you the name one by one and let them say something about the school, right? About themselves, maybe, and about the school. So Dana Rappaport is the principal of PS 234 in Tribeca, New York.
Hi, I'm Dana Rappaport, and I've been principal of PS 234. This is my 3rd year. PS 234 is a really special place. I feel very fortunate to be the leader of the school there. It is a school that was founded in 1988, which coincidentally is the year that I became a teacher. Although I wasn't a teacher there, it was the year I became a teacher. And so we have that in common. And it is a school that was founded on the principles of social studies being the heart of its education. And so everything flows from social studies and being connected to all the curricular areas, being connected to social studies, and also constructivism and kids building knowledge through building it themselves, through inquiry. And also there's so much community in the school and so much respect for the way teachers interact with the children, and there's so much joy. I think that the thing that I value most about the school is that when you walk into the building, and when I walked into the building for the very first time, I felt it immediately, is that there is this joy and this love and the way that the children and the teachers and all the staff members interact is just beautiful. And so it's a wonderful place to go every day and to learn.
I'm so glad you got there. Julie Cavanagh is the principal of PS 15 in Redhook, Brooklyn.
Thanks, Renee. So I'm Julie. I'm a first-year principal at PS 15. However, I've been there since 2001. So one of those rare cases where I got to really come up in a school community. Many of us have been working together for 20, 15, 10 years, which makes leading the school really unique and special and such a joy for me. We operate under a diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and liberation framework. Liberation being our, ultimate goal. Our school is a magnet school of the arts. Arts integration is at the center of our work. We're a STEAM school, so project-based learning and inquiry through the arts and sciences is something that guides our work, and every grade has integrated interdisciplinary units that anchor the work vertically from pre-K through 5. And I think, one of how Dana described her school, I was like, oh, she's describing PS 15. Our sort of saying is PS 15, it's an equity and joy thing. I think that that's something that anybody feels when they walk through the doors of our building. Very collaborative and loving and dedicated staff and community and PTA. And like Dana said, I just feel so lucky to be able to go to work there every day.
Thank you. Bob Groff is principal of PS 244 in Flushing, Queens, sometimes called the Tails School. So maybe you could explain that also, why it's called Tails.
So we were founded in 2008. I'm one of the co-founders of TAILS, and it's the Active Learning Elementary School. Because in our founding, we were based on health and nutrition as the focus. Having come from Harlem originally, as a group of us came together and said, we see a lot of need for health and nutrition as a focal point. And we came together, planned to go to the Bronx, and we ended up in Flushing, and very happy we did. After several years, we became the first vegetarian public school in the country, and that was very exciting for us. And as we've continued to grow, our focal point has also grown to really closely involve racial equity. So Julie, I definitely want to talk to you after this. Over the last 4 years, we've seen the growing need for inclusion within our curriculum of direct racial equity work, and never more evident in the last year and a half during the pandemic. And so we've been working really hard to revise our curriculum and instruction to fit that important aspect that really hasn't been addressed like it should be across our system. So in addition to that, I heard all those things about community building as well through both of you already, and it occurs to me that must be why Renee works with us all. Building community is also something that's really important to us, and to come together and to instill a joy for learning in our children through inquiry and through play, especially in our younger grades, is very important to us. And it brings out that opportunity for social interaction and language development. Because also in our school, we have 55% of students that are English language learners. So to give them that opportunity for interaction is really important.
Thanks, Bob. And Gabriel Feldberg is the principal of Central Park East in Harlem, Manhattan, and hear about.
That's true. So my name is Gabriel Feldberg. I am in my 4th year as principal of Central Park East 1, a school I love enough to wear the t-shirt to this meeting. And I'm speaking to you proudly from my office. And I'm here, when I came to the school, I found it to be a school like no other I've ever been a part of in any way. There are many things that have defined the school across its years since it was founded in the mid-70s to with deep progressive origins. But some of the most distinctive things for me are the way that children are understood and thought about by everyone. An example that I'll give is just class making, which we were doing today as we moved our clerical day to today. And this was the 2nd meeting that we've had about class making, and it involves the entire staff knowing the observations and histories of all children, and to think about how 45 children move up together to the next grade, and everyone who contributes to that and owns those children and shares their history and thinks about who would support another child's voice and who would be a good companion, the combinations that haven't worked, how they think, what they love, their passions. That is an extraordinary thing. And we're not done. We'll come back to that for one more meeting. Some of the other distinctive things about it are the way that children learn. The focus of our learning is something called work time or project time, where children every single day do incredible hands-on work, sewing, they work with wood, they build blocks that stretch from the floor to the constructions that stretch from the floor to the ceiling. They take real risks and real responsibilities and earn the trust of their teachers to manage difficult tools in difficult spaces. I've spoken a little bit about how relationships affect that, but part of what is also really important in that self-direction is that it often leads to a focus on justice, which is paralleled in the work of the staff. It is has always been a teacher-led school where all the adults have a lot of voice and demand a lot of transparency and a lot of work that focuses on equity in so many ways. And it is a place where any one adult could stop a meeting to raise the point about what we are not seeing and argue for something in a very different kind of way. And that voice makes us all stronger.
Gabriel, can I ask you a question? You said that that the whole school does work time. Is that goes all the way up through what grade?
From pre-K through the end every day of 5th grade. And so the kind of work that they're doing grows over time, but there are some things that we do as hands-on work that continue year upon year upon year. So, you know, we also begin every year by making torn paper collage self-portraits of ourselves. And that is part of, and that is done every single year in the fall from pre-K through 5th grade. And at the end of 5th grade, when students open their collection folders and observe some of the work they have created over time, they re-encounter every self-portrait of themselves that they have done from the time they were 4 until months before their graduation. And they reflect on that work. And because it is a routine, and because their hands are always involved, they see not only how they have thought about themselves differently, but also the development of the work of their hands.
Right. Okay. Well, I was thinking that it's been such an amazing year. It's just been, I feel for everybody involved with this, with education this year. And I was trying to think about some of the challenges that I thought you had, and I made a little list of it, and I'm sure you're going to laugh at the end because you're going to say, oh, that's nothing, right? Because this is just what I thought of. The idea that you had to do random testing, all right? How do you do it? Where is it done? Who does it? You know, and that whole thing. Getting the school building ready for the children. All of the things you had to do to your building and your classrooms. The principals wanting to delay the opening for not open on September 10th, but giving teachers more time to prepare, and that being denied. You had to open on September 10th. Scheduling hybrid and remote, both. Creating a curriculum and a schedule to accommodate this kind of blended learning. Calculating how many students can safely be in the building at one time and follow social distancing protocols. I think according to Mark Cannizzaro, I was reading the head of the CSA, your union, this is what he said, that you were given limited resources and support. He complained about that. Angry parents, not necessarily angry at you, but just angry because of the lack of clarity from the city about when the schools are opening, not opening. Keeping a line of communication open with your staff and with families. Being sure all students have access to internet and laptops or iPads, which is probably more of a challenge in one area than one school more than another, I'm sure. Training teachers and administrators on using technology. There's so much technology. I don't know how you do it. Families and dealing with the families and students and staff and your own families going through possible emotional crisis due to family or friends who are sick, or somebody who even died from the virus, having to deal with that as in a comforting way. Teachers and administrators supporting their own children's learning and emotional needs at the same time that you're doing this for the schools. So these are just some things I thought of, and I have a feeling, I don't know, maybe it's the tip of the iceberg. When you think about this year, when you think about the way you're getting through it, it's almost over, all right? What were the biggest challenges that you faced this year? You're laughing, right? Because I know it's hard to even, but I mean, the really biggest ones, like what drove you?
How much time do we have?
Yeah. Prioritize.
And when, at what point, at which point?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so say something about that, Dana. Like, what do you mean by at what point?
Well, because there were these like milestone points along the way. Like if you go all the way back to March, right? I will never forget. I will never forget March, right? The day that we were home on Sunday and we finally got the announcement that schools were going to close, that we were going to have a snow day, and that we were going to come into school and that we were going to be trained on how to use the technology. And I kept thinking, I wonder who's coming in to train us. I wonder where the trainers are going to be.
Did somebody actually come to train you, or did you have to like figure it all out on your own?
School. So we get to school. Oh, and then, you know, people were so scared. The staff was so scared to be there. And we were told in no uncertain circumstances, you must have the staff there. They have to be there and they're not allowed to leave, which was ridiculous. Like it was scary, right? And staff was scared to be there. And they all came into the cafeteria, right? We didn't know we were supposed to like distance and all of that. Everybody comes in. There were no rules. And I was like, okay, so where are the trainers? And in our inboxes comes, remember the thing that comes in, this thing about how to self-train on the technology. There was no guidance.
I didn't know that. No.
There was no guidance. And then how to use Google Classroom, how to use Zoom, and we had to make decisions really quickly about what we were going to do. How we were going to do this thing. Nobody knew what to do. I'd never heard of Zoom. I didn't know what it was. Or were we going to use Google Meets? That was the other option. Were we going to go with, there was some other thing, right, that we could choose, some other platform other than Google Classroom. There was Teams, but then there was a third one. So we had to like wade our way through all of that. We had to train ourselves. The teachers had to train themselves. We had to train each other. So we had to make really quick decisions about what we were going to do. And then, you know, so we made some decisions. We were, okay, we're not going to decide what kind of live thing to use today. Today, we're going to do the Google Classroom thing. And we decided Google Classroom right away because our 4th and 5th graders already did that. And so the teachers knew that. So we said, okay, that's what we're going to do. You know, so we made decisions. We made decisions as teams. We met with each grade team. We said that it was okay if grade teams would do different things, but we wanted each grade team to do the same thing. So all of kindergarten, all of 1st grade, because we knew that it would be easier on the families and easier on the teams if everybody was going to be together.
But who made the decisions as to what they were going to be doing?
Collectively.
I think one thing you said to add on to is information. Right? We, as principals, as school leaders, we didn't have the information. It wasn't being communicated to us in any clear way. There was no consistency in communication, and we still have that issue. So we're still making decisions at the school level with lack of full information. It's still happening now with the struggles with summer rising. So we're kind of like, we'll leave that alone. But we're wading through it all, trying to make decisions that are best for our community and our school with whatever we can figure out on our own, because the help doesn't come as we would want it to. I think that's been true from March to now.
And when we decided on Zoom, I think it was 2 months later that we were told we couldn't use it anymore.
Yeah, I thought that you weren't able to use it.
So we were using it. And then we were told we can't use it. So we had to, after all the parents got used to it, after all the teachers learned it, after we were live, we had to switch everything over to a new platform that we didn't know.
I know I did something with 2 of the classes in Bob's school, right? What with Fanny's class, Bob, and with Angela's class. And they said to me before, so we're going to do this on Google something.
Neat.
And I said, I have no idea what that is. And so when I met with Angela's class, which was a second grade class, I don't think I did the best job, quite truthfully, because I was reading to them. I didn't know where to put the book. I didn't say anything. I was better with the second time with the Fanny's class.
We were all in that place.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Julie, as a first year principal, like, what was this like for you?
Yeah. Well, I became principal mid-year this year. So, going back to March, I was the assistant principal then. And, I think when I reflect on this last year and a half, I think less about what we weren't given, or more to the point, what kept changing. I mean, I think that was, one of the hardest things, is that it was a constant moving target. And, my former principal and I, Peggy, were lucky enough, we had worked together for 20 years. And so that collective experience as a union chapter leader in the UFT, and her being principal and assistant principal for so long at the school, we had an advantage in terms of being strategic in how we approach things, because we know how the system works and how the system sometimes doesn't work. And so we really tried to be proactive in making quick decisions and making plans all along the way to deal with the systems part of it. So, our initial step was immediate messaging to the staff in the chaos of coming in that Tuesday and Wednesday, and nobody, we have a lot of staff members who barely emailed, at that point. So this was like a big jump. And for us, it was really the message, like right now it's connection over content. We need to make sure that our students and our families are touched by us every single day. And so that was our first approach, our first step and our first approach, coming up with one-on-one schedules, because not everybody was going to have technology. The technology we did have that wasn't bolted down to a table, getting it into the hands of families. And we made like priority order for that: kids in shelters, kids in NYCHA, kids with IEPs. Every kid, every teacher, every para, everybody hands on deck. We made, 460 individualized bags. So everybody had a classroom library at their house, had a math toolkit and manipulatives and whiteboards and wipe off markers and all of the things, crayons, pencils, markers, all of it. Because, from an equity perspective, you can't assume what kids have at home. And also we wanted everybody to have the same stuff, right? We made packets for 6 weeks worth of packets for everybody, because we didn't know when everyone was going to have technology. And then teachers set about making individual schedules using FaceTime and their cell phones, if it was a phone call, if it was a FaceTime, whatever, so that every child, every family had a point of contact every single day until everybody could get on Google Classroom and on Zoom. And then in the summer, when our attention shifted to preparing for this year, we immediately took advantage of the option to carve out an exception model, which we applied for and were lucky enough to get approved. And we did that knowing what we know about systems, so that we could arrange our day and arrange our week in a way that would really be responsive to our community. So for example, in our community, trust is a huge issue. And we wanted to make sure that every student was connected to what would have been their classroom and their classroom teacher in a normal year. We knew that there was going to have to be substitutes, and we didn't want to have whole groups of children being taught by substitutes, especially again from an equity perspective, because we knew the majority of our families were going to choose remote only. So in our exception model, we were able to have the option for teachers to broadcast and do live instruction with remote students at home. We designed our program so that every child was a part of a homeroom crew, what would have been their typical, experienced, dedicated teacher in classroom. And whether you were remote or whether you were in person, you were all connected with that homeroom crew, and you started your day and ended your day with circles together. So if you were in the classroom, everybody at home's broadcast on the Promethean board. If you're at home, you see everybody on your screen. And really centered social emotional learning and the essence of play through Zoom and these kinds of ways, but we really centered and emphasized connection and care as our main priority, knowing that the academics would come, but without doing that first, nothing meaningful was going to be learned if our kids didn't feel safe and centered.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I was thinking about, well, maybe after Gabriel speaks, I can bring this up. Gabriel?
So I think I would echo a lot of what everyone said before. I think those first days in March, there were some moves we made that were pretty similar to what PS15 did. We are a very analog school, a proudly analog school that, where children, touch clay and build with blocks, and they don't use Google Meets as their primary learning modality. So trying to recreate some form of that at home in the way that we did that in the first few days, the first instinct from staff was to spend a lot of time making individualized bags for children to go, or multiple sets of things. And by the end of that week, we had 4 remaining in the whole building. Like, we got them out. The spring was really hard, and there was some novelty to it for months that carried us. And I feel like everyone sort of wore out in mid-May, and we took summer to really rework some of how we were doing it. There were some important decisions along the way. First was I let our enrollment fall a lot. Everyone who left was not replaced. And so that reducing class size by a lot, and also being fortunate to be in a building with very large classrooms, meant that just about half of our children opened the year in person, and the remainder were in remote classes, but of no more than 20. And we had extra staff in the remote classes, and they were all full-time staff with us. And so every single child was in small groups every single day to learn. That was one of the sort of wisest things we did. We also really came back to routines and more consistent ways of doing things, through that model. And what we ended up with was something that I think we were pretty lucky to be able to do. We have ended up not trying to keep this year the relationships of the children who are remote and in person the same way together. And they're having somewhat different experiences. So, our kindergartners who are remote right now are reading as never before. They're in guided reading groups every single day with a reading recovery teacher, and that has been an incredibly enriching experience for them. Meanwhile, our K1 kids here in the building are in the middle of a bird study by observing a few blocks away in Central Park, and they're on fire with that, and building and constructing birds and doing all kinds of things. And they're doing different, and there's an animal study that's being done remotely, but it's different, and they're each operating sort of different ways and having different experiences, and we'll come back together, I hope, pretty carefully. I think one of the things that was really helpful in all of this was the fact that staff here have a long history of being empowered to say what they think, and being really the administrative responsibilities and planning that they take on helped us get to this. They found a way early on to ensure that the in-person teachers stayed with only their children and taught them remotely on the days off, So every class stayed with one teacher, or more than one teacher if they were remote, because they would divide up for groups, but they had the same consistent teachers every single day. That was an innovation that came from these teachers when they saw what had been proposed. And so children had much more consistent adult relationships as a result, rather than have teachers who were in person for 2 classes and never saw them remotely. We also found a way in November to expand, and we got approval to do it, to go to 5 days a week early on for our in-person children. And so for all of them. So staff pushing for that was a really big lesson and important. And I think and so those were some of the successes that I think those conditions and our teachers and paras using their voice really made that happen as we innovated ways to try to replicate something of ourselves in this unusual circumstance.
Did you get a chance to speak on that?
Yeah, I spoke a little bit, but I guess I could add on to say, look, this has been, it's been incredibly difficult for very many reasons, right? One thing that we have seen and continue to see is the resilience of kids and the struggles that they continue to go through at home and at school, the social emotional needs they have, but the joy that you can still see in them, and the drive that they want to be with each other, even if it's on a Zoom link or a Google Meet, like they want to be together. And it's very hard not to get stuck in how difficult it's been for everybody. But they're showing us some positives as well. Our kindergarten is in the middle of doing a racial equity based and gender based baby inquiry. And they just got, the babies came 2 months late, because that's what happens, right? We just got all the babies in, and the kindergarten teachers came in. First time all the kindergarten teachers have been in together all year, and the teachers were excited to be together, and they handed out the babies. Some of the kids were starstruck that their teachers were real people and not just characters on TV. But look, it's reality. But what we see is that they're carrying the babies with them into their meetings now, into their Google Meets, into their music. They want to sing to the babies in music, and they're talking about the gender-related questions that come up. Some of the boys are talking about playing or not playing with babies, according to what the parents talk about. We're talking about what it means to have a baby that is a different race than they are. And there's a lot of complications and struggles that come up with that. So, that we're learning from the kids during this time too. And I think that's something we want to hold on to as we go into next year.
Julie, you said something that made me think of this next question. I hadn't thought to ask it, but so when you go back in September, like the media is really making a big deal about how children have, quote, fallen behind, right? But I'm wondering, where do you think you're going to put your priorities? Is it going to be at first on helping them ramp up the academics? Or is it going to be on really thinking about the social and emotional needs and maybe finding ways to prioritize that? What do you think will be your priority there? Julie, I see you had your head going. And maybe you could say something about the population you have also. It's not a Upper East Side.
Well, it's funny because my school is a CSI school. We're on the bad list. And our school has we serve a large student population with IEPs, over 35%. We have a specialized program for children with intellectual and multiple disability. And we're located in Redhook, Brooklyn, which is home to the second largest housing project in the country. it's funny that you asked the question, because we had our PD day today, and we started our day today dreaming together in collaborative groups about what we want the focus of the beginning of the year to be, and how we're going to launch next school year. And we had also, I have a Students Justice League, I call it, which is basically like an opportunity for me to have lunch with kids across grade bands. I do it once every week, and just for them to be able to like give feedback and tell me how it's going, and you know what needs to be fixed in the bathroom or whatever else. And then we also, part of the CEP process this year is doing student interviews. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from the kids, which I shared before staff went into their breakout meetings. And what the kids shared consistently, and the teachers agreed, is the kids are very clear: we need to play, we need to play, we need to play, we need to play. And we don't play enough. We haven't played enough. Most of us have been locked in our houses and our apartments for 1.5 years. We need to play, we need to play, we need to play. And the message is very loud and clear. And the teachers feel it too. And so we, you know, at our meeting today, we talked about those first 2 months of school really being a time where SEL is centered, where collaboration and interpersonal communication, discussion, and discourse is centered. Our kids are not going to learn if they don't feel safe. And they're not going to learn if they don't feel and can't function as, you know, a caring, loving member of a community. And we've all been separated. And we also talked about today, you know, like you think about our kids who are going to be in pre-K and K next year, when the pandemic started, they were 3, you know, some of them maybe even 2.5. And so you just think about simple things like reading picture books where, you know, somebody's going to the store. Well, some of our kids may not have working memories of something that simple, of what it is to like go to the store, go to the grocery store, right? So all of these experiences, things that we take for granted that like you draw on, you know, to be a member of a community, a lot of our kids may have not even had those experiences at all. And so we spent a lot of time today thinking about how are we going to, you know, teach into those experiences, provide those experiences, and what structures are we going to create to facilitate play, to facilitate connection, to facilitate discussion. And so, you know, we're going to keep the opening and closing circles protocol as part of our day. The first 2 months of school, pre-K through 5, is going to have some form of play period set aside for play every day besides recess. And then after October, you know, we'll slowly, you know, do a gradual release, and still keeping play as part of our work, but prioritizing that particularly in the first 2 months, because we know that that's the catalyst for any learning that's going to come later.
Thanks. Dana, you have a very different population, but children are children, right?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we actually, 75% of our student population has been in school. So that alone is very different. They've been coming to school, and now we are 5 days a week. We actually don't have hybrid learning anymore. So we only have 90 students who are fully remote. And those students have been with the same teacher all year. Some of those students will be returning, some of them won't be returning. Some of those students have been learning from places as far away as South Korea, California, faraway places, different time zones. It's very different. But I will say that social emotional learning is at the heart of our school still, and that we will start the year in that way. We are a responsive classroom school, and we will be using those practices within our school. We also have been doing a lot of equity work, a lot of racial equity work. And I think that that work is extremely important, especially because we are a school that has a lot of white kids in it. And so that work becomes very important in a school like ours
Mhm. Yeah.
too.
Right.
And we have done a lot of revamping of our curriculum, and have actually done a lot of taken a lot of hard looks at our social studies curriculum, and in the lower grades particularly have done a lot of identity work as the launching of our year. Um, and even in the upper grades, the fifth grade is doing a whole year of social justice work as their entire year. The third grade, when they do the Lenape study, they have incorporated a lot of different perspective taking. Fourth grade, when they do the colonial work, they also a lot of different perspective taking. I think that we've also done a lot of work revamping our libraries. We're going to be doing a lot of that work. And in our PD next year, we're going to, we talked about it today actually in our staff meeting, a lot of our PD work is going to be around that. We have a staff SEL committee, and it's interesting because in the beginning of the school year, that SEL committee, what all we thought about was coming back to school and supporting kids, supporting staff, supporting families. And then we shifted that work once we sort of came back to school into really talking about diversity, equity, and racial justice work, and really have like, that's what our focus has been for the remainder of this year and going into next year. So I would say that that's going to be the focus at the beginning of the year too, coming back to school. We've been talking about doing like how we're going to welcome kids back who haven't been in the building and integrate them back into school, and working with the PTA also on that. They've been doing some events in the park, bringing people back that way, having, just having a picnic in the park with people, because there haven't been, our PTA is very active in having like events in the school like Fall Fest and all these things where they bring families in, and we haven't been able to have families in. So how do you gather? So
That's a nice idea.
What?
That's a very nice idea, the idea of going into the park to meet.
Mm-hmm.
Gabriel, what about you? I mean, your school is a progressive school, but like, you still have to think about children, the whole like falling behind thing and all that. Where does that fit in here? Like, how is it going to fit in at the beginning of the year?
Well, I think the first thing to think about are some of the additional strengths that children have developed this year. I don't know, particularly for those children who have spent so much time at home under very difficult circumstances, how that's changed their imaginations, how that has impacted a whole range of thinking and the ability to create, because we haven't seen them, we see what they do remotely, and that's been like children suddenly go from, constructing at a cardboard with a box cutter and hot glue and suddenly start building websites to raise funds for their favorite causes. Like, it's a very different kind of, creativity and learning, and we'll see what strengths they acquired there. I do know that on the first days back in the building in September, when kids were coming back, obviously things are very, very, very different when children can't sort of work together and they're working in independent, they can't go around the room and get materials and touch things the way that they did. But I imagine sort of, Bob, what you were talking about with the babies and when they first arrived and got into kindergartners' hands, like what I saw those first days back when children were touching different materials for the first time in 6 months out of their apartments, it was reverential silence just to come into contact with something new, to build with it and explore it and think about it. And I think the combination of these two is going to be really powerful as all of us come back together. I think there's going to be something that happens now as well, where, as I said, we let our enrollment fall pretty deliberately, and now it's going to build back up. And the pandemic, of course, has displaced a lot of people. So, you know, when we return, our school, which spends so much on rhythms and rituals, will have a school where more than half of the children have never been here in June, have never seen have never sung our all school sing songs from spring here in the school. And what that means is that a lot of our returning children are going to actually step up and welcome their new classmates in a brand new kind of way. Those who have familiarity with routines are going to teach them. And it's going to give them a chance to develop something new for those who are returning as they incorporate the biggest contingent ever of new children. And, you know, I want to allow the possibility too that kids develop some other skills around different ways of developing executive functioning while they were home. I saw something just last week where I was watching a fourth grade math group, and they were talking about, they were working with mixed fractions, and this boy sort of came up with an idea that had a misconception, and his teacher has some pretty exquisite wait time, and like she did not, like they sat there for a while in that group, and he on his own figured it out there on Zoom, and then he muted himself and he went to the back of his apartment and came back with a toddler on his hip. And I remember the day at the beginning of April 2020 when I brought him his laptop from school. Like I was going around delivering devices, and that baby had been born at home that day. They decided not to go to the, I think that is the fifth or sixth child in that family, and they did it at home for the first time because they did not want to go into the hospital. That is a toddler now. That person is walking, and there he was, this kid, like in the middle of math, just got this 14-month-old person, carried it expertly, and went back to math. Now, who does, like, you do that when you're a parent, right? Like, like everyone just did that, and here was this, you know, here's this fourth grader who can do it. Right. That's a whole new kind of skill that who knows what else developed for children while they were doing there. And so they're going to come back different, having gone through a lot, but also much richer, and we're going to learn from them.
Yeah, I love Gabriel, I love the way you are putting a high value on what children are gaining from their time at home. You know, I think that's really important. And yeah. Bob, what about you at Tales? Like how, what's the message the teachers will get about how we're going to start this year? Like, you know, where are our priorities when they come back in?
Well, you gave me a good segue, both of you, because we had a lot of conversation today about an asset approach and how do we make sure that we look at kids when they come back in and in terms of what they have gained rather than what they don't have. We know that we have areas academically where students have some gaps. There is truth there. But what you just said, Gabriel, about what that child has gained in care for their little brother or sister, or those of you people talking about technology gains, like they have made different kinds of growth than what we're used to. So we need to work on harnessing some of that and make sure we look at them in an asset view. For us, it's very different than each school looks a little different. We, out of our 489 kids, most of our year we were under 100 in person. We have predominantly immigrant families from mainland China, and most of them had experience with their families with coronavirus in their home countries with their families before it came here. So it was only with this most recent bringing students back to school that we got up to 30% of our kids in person every day. So we know that kids have been talking about concerns that they have coming back. Body image is coming up. How do we make friends is coming up. Even concerns about, there's a lot of stairs in the building. I'm worried about so many stairs. And so we're bringing teachers back to things that we've never had to consider before. And then how do we tie that into building the community in the classroom? How do we have the conversations about what we're concerned about and how we grow from it? Because there's a lot of them that, whether they express it or not, a lot of them are thinking the same things. So we're moving our remote classes up together so that they have that knowledge and understanding of each other. And then we're taking the students that are in person and spreading them around the classes as they move up. Because we think that in terms of kind of an SEL support, with those remote students being together, it will help them make that transition. And we're looping a few teachers along with their classes, as we think that will be additional support for them. And I kind of echo some of the conversations happening around play. Like, they need to re-socialize with each other, need to have those open opportunities to figure it out together. Because they haven't had that for a very long time. Just basic play structures and what do you do when somebody has the block you want is going to be important for them. And that's not strictly academic, but it is too. They need to work through those problems. The academics will come, and we're all going to be under extreme pressure to make it happen sooner rather than later. But I think we all sitting here also know that there's some things that have to come first.
Right.
To have academic success, we have to set the students up for success socially, emotionally, and build the community that we all have worked so hard to have over years. So you know, it's a different kind of work coming back in September. Teachers are stressed about it. We're all stressed about it. But they know, everybody knows what we need to work on. We just need to figure out how to do it all.
Right.
And how do you fit every kid in the classroom? Because I still don't know that answer.
Are you going to have to distance again in September?
Well, I don't know about you all, but if we have to go to 3 feet, I don't see how it's possible.
No, I can't see how you could do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we're at 3 feet now. I mean, I think it really depends. The thing is that it depends on your building, right? And that's the thing, is that everybody's building is different.
Mm.
So depending on your building.
Yeah.
I have 30% in, and it's a problem.
Right.
I mean, in September, like, do you think that children will be able to actually go to a block center and build together, not just separately little buildings? And that's so much a part of that whole social, I don't know.
I think we have to be in that place. In order for schools to open across the city,
Yeah.
we have to be in a place where they can work collaboratively again.
Right, right.
Because we can't even fit kids in a room to keeping desks 3 feet apart.
Yeah.
We don't have the space for it.
Right.
So
I
we
have-
have to be collaborative.
I have a last question for you, because I know I'm keeping you a long time and you had a long day, especially if you did your PD today. All right, I was thinking about this. If you could make school and classroom changes, any kind of changes, without having to consider at all any of the restrictions put on you by the Department of Education, the state, the federal government, or any other restrictive mandates. This is a dream, all right? If you could do that, what would your dream be like? What would your school be like? And out of that, what do you think your legacy would be as a leader of a school? Now, I don't know if you want to answer that or not, but this is something I was thinking about. If anybody wants to answer that, because I know that there are so many restrictions, and mandates that you can't do this, you must do that, blah, 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 etc. Gabriel, I don't know if your school is excused from those mandates, or do you have to follow
No,
them?
not in any real way. My school has a tradition of self-excusing from
Okay,
mandates.
all right.
I'm right there on that the bad list that Julie mentioned, because our school going back several years had a 80-something% opt-out rate of state exams. And the threat of being put on a state naughty list certainly didn't change anyone's behavior. I think my school has actually done an extraordinary job from long before I got here of doing things without necessarily being afraid of being in bureaucratic trouble. And as a result, with a lot of good luck, like having enormous classrooms. Sorry to everyone else. I know what I just said in the context of our last, like we just got lucky real estate. We have a lot of things that we do without regard for regulations, and that was done before I was here. And the changes I wouldn't come up with, I would there are things I would do that might I think what I would do, my legacy will be probably like he was the guy who didn't make changes that ruined us.
Okay. Something that
that's all I'm
in a
going
school
for.
that had been in the news, right? I think that's major. What you just said is major. Right?
Yeah, so just for context, my school was in the news because prior to my being here, principal came into the school and did try to make it a much more conventional school. Some of the community really appreciated the changes that were attempted, but it was really changing the character of the school, and a lot of people feel really strongly about it and did not want those changes. And so I was the person who came in directly after that. I'm lucky. I have learned a lot. There are a lot of things that are not natural to me in the way that things are done here, but I do appreciate a lot of the rationales behind what's here. And I learn from it all the time, and things that I initially thought weren't right, I have come around to. So I'm really lucky to be guided by a really great model for a school.
Gabriel, I want to tell a very quick story of I'm friends with Deborah Meyer, who's the person who started that school. All right, she just turned 90, and I was having lunch with her, right, and we met in Manhattan to have lunch. And while we were at lunch, she seemed very nervous. And I asked her, what's the matter? And she said, they're going to make a decision today about a new principal. They're making a decision, and I am so nervous. This is my baby, this, etc., my passion. And then she gets a phone call, and the person said, Gabriel Feldberg. She said, Gabriel Feldberg, who in the world is that? I said, Deborah, breathe easy. You're in good hands. So we had a nice lunch after that. Bob, do you want to say anything? Do you have any, if you want to think of your legacy, where will that be?
Yeah.
All things taken away, all of the
Sure.
restrictions taken away.
That is something I think about. I was one of the co-founders of our school, and it was a long process to open. And 2008 to now, I have been there consistently the entire time as either the principal or an assistant principal. the school is essentially my baby. So what happens in the school, I'm invested in more than a principal. It's a lot of who I am. And so every little decision, like it's important to me because I want to see the success of our kids. And we've been talking about racial equity quite a bit tonight. 90% of our students are Asian, the vast majority of them from families that immigrated from China. And part of what I hope my legacy to be is to help them find a voice. And we're really proud, and I'm really proud that we started as a school that only goes up to third grade. We started a scholarship fund, and we gave out our first college scholarships last year to our graduating third graders from years ago. And it's something I'm really proud of, that we have students now that are going to Syracuse and to Vassar and to schools that they're really being successful at. And we have built a community to support them in finding their voice and finding their strength. And I'm proud of that. And I think our school as a group and a community, I think we're all proud of that. And it drives us to do it together.
I must say, when I go into work, I've missed your school so much this year.
Oh, we've missed you too.
Almost painfully, truthfully, almost painfully. And when I go in there, I just feel all elated. Even the days they're long, for me, they're long days, because I work through lunchtime usually. And, so I leave my house early and get home like close to 5 sometimes because of traffic and all that. And it's a long day for me, but I just come back so charged up and so excited. So yeah, it's a very joyous place,
Thank you.
Dana, anything you wanted to add, or like, is it too overwhelming at this point? You just,
I think what I want for children when they go to school is to come away from the experience feeling that learning is fun, and that learning is important, and that they will be lifelong learners, that they will love reading books and writing and doing math, and that they will be kind, to one another, and that they will be kind moving through the world, and that they will question things. And if I've had a part in doing that for young people, then I think that I'll feel happy.
Julie, did you want to add anything? Or?
I'll just say I put this on, I do a staff playlist every week, new pandemic times, something that I'll keep post-pandemic times. And this week's was, launching Pride Month and celebrating Pride. And I found this meme of Little Nas X, and he says, some people are accusing me of promoting my agenda. And I am. My agenda is liberation. And I just felt like it was such the perfect, thing to put on the front cover of our playlist this week. And I think it's really at the heart of everything that I hope I am doing as a principal and hope to do as a principal. I want students to be leaders of their own learning and have a student-directed classrooms in school, and really just for all of the grown-ups and for all of the kids to be able to be their whole true selves in all of that beautifulness.
Right.
I think that's work.
I think if all the schools are run by people like you, I think the children in the city would be in very, very good hands. And personally, I hope lots of administrators come and visit your schools, because I think that it's important to go in and see joyous learning like that. And I want to thank you so much taking time out from what obviously is a very busy time for you. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Renee.
Okay.
Renee.
Thank you.
Thank you all.